Sea of Thieves has many pillars of gameplay and storytelling that make it a fantastic game, but back in the days of yore, we used to have 4 voyages and a world event to earn our keep, and we had to share the world event. And that's always been the most fun part of Sea of Thieves, at least in my opinion. But what is a world event? Well, if you're unfamiliar with the game, world events are server-wide events with the sole purpose of being a catalyst for player interaction, both positive and negative. For something to be considered a world event, it needs to have 3 components. 1. It needs to be visible across the map. This can be in the form of a giant skull cloud with glowing eyes, a ship-shaped cloud, a red skull, not the Marvel one, or a giant twisting tornado of fiery fury. There was also the giant red screaming skull, and he used to say something about our thighs be kindling or something. I can't really remember, it's been so long. God, I miss him. 2. It needs to have an AI threat involved, as a means of players having an activity once they arrive at the event. This can be skeletons backed by big skeletons, skeletons backed by flaming skeletons, or skeleton ships. Sorry phantoms, sirens and ocean crawlers, Sea of Thieves is officially the Bone Zone. There were ghost ships with Flameheart, but again, no longer exist and was easily the best one. I'm not biased at all. 3. It needs to have a big pile of loot as a reward to ensure when players do complete it, they don't immediately get rewarded when they finish the world event. Rare want you to pick up every single piece of loot, and they want you to be vulnerable while you do it. All 3 of these components are needed to create a world event and in turn force players into a concentrated area of the map. I think world events have a different effect on the game currently compared to launch or whenever they have been released. If we look at how these were designed from the run up to the game's launch, world events are deliberately designed to cause conflict or cooperation. Do you risk fighting with the chance to lose it all, or do you cooperate for a potentially lower payout, still with a possible outcome of betrayal? The design choice is the quintessential pirate dilemma. Do you let greed take over, or increase your chances for an easier payday? When you meet a crew, you can never know their intentions. To get Grandpa Ray out again, let me take you back to the good old days. Take it away, Grandpa Ray. Back in my day. I'm not doing the voice. Back in our day, we only had one world event, the Skull Fort. Of course, you had the trading companies too, but when everyone would see a Skull Fort pop, it was all hands on deck to sail to it as soon as possible. These babies would pop every 3 hours and fights could last more, just to get a hold of that sweet 8 to 12,000 gold, tax not included. The forts shall never be forgotten. We pirates fought valiantly, but for every one of them, we lost 3 score of our own. Exhilaration, pride, hatred, rage. The forts teased out our dearest emotions. Okay. Anyway, he was right, these things would get nasty as this was the best way to get gold and progress the pirate legend, which was a mean feat back in the day. Oh, and just forget about the times where you spent 3 hours to get absolutely nothing. Those were the days. I remember on the 2nd or 3rd day of the game's launch, I teamed up with a friendly galleon crew and split the loot. Well, I stole the Stronghold skull from under their noses whilst we turned in, but maybe they didn't even know what that was. When the world was a wild frontier, you had more of a chance of working together because no one was good at the game. The knowledge we have now is just on a different level. The paranoia was heart-pounding too. You would be checking the horizon for ships every minute or so because there was a very high chance players were on the way, they just weren't in render distance yet. But the original Skull Forts remained this way right up into the release of the Skeleton Fleet's in-Curse sales, which sort of acted in the same way, but players were even more likely to team up. This was due to the challenge being that much harder. And for the life of me, I can't remember if it was because generally players are better at the game now, or these skeleton fleets have been toned down. But when I ask you guys now, how often do you do a world event, or even see others do it? My crew for one only does them when we throw up a Reaper flag to get some gold. Rarely, if ever, do we get a challenge, and this was the same before Season 8. I think the reason for this is in 2 tiers. Firstly, there is just so much more to do now, so many ways to earn gold. When Sea of Thieves came out, it was really fun. I loved it, but it was criticised for being bare. But with all the new updates we've had, so has the breadth of activities increased. And to sound like IGN, I genuinely mean that. If you want story stuff, you have 16 tall tales to complete and their commendations, or head to the Sunken Kingdom and read the journals, or you can play the new adventure that comes out each month. Want PvP? Built on the Hourglass of Fate and fight one-on-one. Want some adventure and just general treasure? Pick one of the 9 voyages and their Ashen counterparts. Do you want to do world events? There's 4 in rotation, chain them if you want. Want to spawn your own world event? The Fort of the Dam's got you covered. If you want to fish, pull out the rod and go ahead. No, not like that. The beauty of all of this is that it creates a wealth of things to do. Naturally, players will want to engage in new content. We've been dealing with these world events for nearly 2 years at the latest. The second aspect of the phenomena is that, with the exception of Ashen Winds, the world events just aren't really efficient for leveling up or making gold, and Ashen Winds gets away with it because you can batter them with tridents. Legend of the Veil has superseded the Fort of Fortune and Fort of the Damned. Sea forts have done the same to regular forts and the skeleton ships. You can do both pieces of Season 6's content with less hassle than the world events. So what am I proposing? A new world event, of course. In Season 8, Rare did an amazing job of adding long-term goals, and I reckon they can do and will do this moving forward. I don't think they should do something to Molten Sands, as it's a bit out of the way, but we can tackle this in 2 ways. First of all, previous world events should get a buff or changes. For instance, the regular forts should have phantoms added and a mix of normal and phantom loot in them, with the overall value being much higher. Skeleton ships should have the same treatment, but reward a cache of cursed cannonballs. The Fort of Fortune and Damned should have an overall buff to loot, but in the case of the latter, you should have coloured phantoms to fight. Therefore, you'd have the Phantoms of Fate. But the biggest change would be to the Sea Dogs Tavern. The Sea Dogs Tavern resides in the middle of the map and was previously owned by DeMarco and Lasedi, the Pyro Lord's children. In the book Heart of Fire, we learn they take over this area. It used to be one of Captain Flameheart's main strongholds. Can you see where I'm going with this? In turn, as Captain Flameheart is back now, the Dark Brethren should take it over, with the potential for a new world event. You didn't see that coming, did you? Essentially, Amaranta has conjured up a twisted version of the tavern in the adventure, The Hunter's Cry. She used to be one of the leaders of the Sea Dogs, and the Brethren are in need of a new home. Imagine if they used Rathbone's skull to bring the twisted tavern into the real world. Periodically, as a rare world event, a big masked skull would show up above it, with a cackle from Wanda to notify everyone on the server. The world event would task players of taking out waves of phantoms and ghost ships. That way, you're hopping to and from land. As it's a central location and close to the Reaper's hideout, the centre of the map will become a giant server-wide fight for the loot. In the vault will be an array of items for each trading company and a bunch of commendations tied to this world event. And of course, some cosmetics for completing it. To keep it fresh, it would be awesome to have a cosmetic set awarded to all players who complete it. But the pool would rotate monthly, similar to how emissary ledgers work. You can get the jacket and hat in January, and hook and peg leg in February. These would be earned for 5 and 10 completions each month. That way you've got content that lasts at least a year, and Rare can always add new rewards to it. Oh, and the reason it wouldn't be Flameheart is because we can kinda side with him now, so yeah, it doesn't really make sense. So in conclusion, world events are the bread and butter of Sea of Thieves. Reminiscing about the old days and the carnage back then has been excellent, and I certainly would love to see world events get updated in 2023. Although I would certainly prefer all the activities we have now over fighting for 8 hours to get a stronghold skull. Trust me, it seems like it was worth it at the time, but okay, yeah, it was still worth it.